June 12, 1944, Normandy, France. The Sherman tank, Fury 2, crouched behind a hedgerow like a steel predator, its 75mm gun trained on the gap where German armor was expected to emerge. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell pressed his headphones tight against his ears, listening to the crackling static that connected his tank to forces the enemy could never imagine. Outside, the Norman countryside stretched in deceptive tranquility, broken only by the distant rumble of German panzers maneuvering through the ancient bocage. Inside the Sherman's cramped turret, radio operator Tommy Rodriguez adjusted frequency dials with practiced precision. The radio equipment mounted beside his position looked standard to any casual observer, but Rodriguez knew better. Hidden within the conventional communication gear were advanced frequency channels that linked his tank directly to P-47 Thunderbolts circling 15,000 feet overhead. With a single coded transmission, Rodriguez could summon death from the sky with surgical precision. The German advance was proceeding exactly as American intelligence had predicted. Through his periscope, Mitchell watched enemy infantry moving through the hedgerows, while panzers provided overwatch from concealed positions. The Germans advanced with confidence born from 3 years of armored warfare success, expecting to engage American Shermans in the kind of steel-on-steel duels that had favored German armor throughout the war. They had no idea that the battlefield was about to be transformed into something they had never experienced. Rodriguez keyed his microphone and transmitted a brief coded message that sounded like routine tank communication to any German radio operator monitoring American frequencies. But 30,000 feet above the Norman countryside, the message triggered a response that would arrive with devastating speed and overwhelming force. The sky was about to become a weapon, and the Sherman was its trigger. What would the Germans have thought if they knew the Shermans below could summon death from above? The Sherman tank entered the Normandy campaign carrying the burden of American armor doctrine that prioritized mobility, reliability, and mass production over the heavyweight armor and high-velocity guns that characterized German panzer design. American M4 Sherman tanks weighed 33 tons compared to the German Tigers' 57 tons, mounted 75mm guns compared to the Tiger's fearsome 80mm cannon, and featured armor thickness that German anti-tank weapons could penetrate at distances exceeding 2,000 yards. German panzer commanders approached the Normandy battles with complete confidence that their technological superiority would dominate American armor. German tank crews had nicknamed the Sherman Ronson after the American cigarette lighter, claiming that American tanks lit up and burned as easily as striking a match. This contempt was based on solid combat experience from North Africa and Italy, where German armor had consistently outgunned and outfought Sherman units in direct engagements. German confidence was reinforced by the arrival of new Panther and Tiger II tanks, whose armor was virtually invulnerable to Sherman fire at combat ranges. What German commanders failed to understand was that American military doctrine had evolved beyond the tank versus tank duels that dominated European armored warfare thinking. American forces had developed integrated combined arms tactics that treated individual tanks as components of larger weapon systems that included artillery, aircraft, and radio-controlled coordination. The Sherman was never intended to fight German panzers alone. It was designed to serve as a mobile command platform that could coordinate devastating attacks from multiple sources simultaneously. The radio systems installed in American Sherman tanks represented technological achievements that German intelligence had completely failed to detect or understand. While German tanks carried standard military radios for tactical communication, American Shermans were equipped with frequency-agile transceivers capable of communicating with ground units, artillery observers, and most importantly, aircraft operating on completely different radio networks. This communication integration gave American tank commanders capabilities that no German panzer crew possessed. American air-ground coordination had been perfected through 2 years of combat experience in North Africa, Italy, and the Pacific theaters. Forward air controllers trained to work with tank units could direct aircraft with precision that turned close air support from a general area weapon into a surgical instrument capable of striking individual vehicles or small unit positions. The techniques developed through this training enabled American tank commanders to call for air support with the same ease and accuracy that German commanders called for artillery support. The scale of American air power available for ground support in Normandy was unprecedented in military history. The Allied Expeditionary Air Force operated more than 5,000 fighter bombers specifically dedicated to ground support missions, compared to fewer than 300 German aircraft available for the entire Western Front. American P-47 Thunderbolts could carry 2,500 pounds of bombs or rockets, while P-51 Mustangs provided escort and strafing capabilities that could engage targets ranging from individual soldiers to armored vehicles. German defensive doctrine in Normandy was based on the assumption that American ground forces would be limited to weapons and tactics similar to those employed by German units. German commanders positioned their armor and artillery according to calculations that assumed American tanks would engage at typical combat ranges using direct fire weapons. The possibility that American tanks could coordinate immediate airstrikes against German positions was simply not considered in German tactical planning. The psychological preparation was vastly different between American and German tank crews. German panzer commanders approached Normandy battles with confidence based on superior armor protection and firepower, expecting to dominate American forces through technological advantages that had proven decisive in previous campaigns. American Sherman crews understood that their survival depended on avoiding direct engagements with German armor while using mobility and communication to coordinate attacks that German forces couldn't counter. American tank radio operators received specialized training in air-ground coordination procedures that enabled them to function as forward air controllers while maintaining their primary duties as tank crew members. This dual-role capability meant that every Sherman tank equipped with advanced radio gear could serve as an air support coordination platform, multiplying American strike capabilities by factors that German intelligence never calculated. The strategic implications were enormous, but completely invisible to German observation. American tank units that appeared vulnerable when considered as individual armored vehicles actually represented nodes in a communication network that could concentrate overwhelming firepower against any target within minutes of detection. German commanders would soon discover that engaging American tank units meant fighting not just the tanks they could see, but the entire American Air Force that those tanks could summon. German intelligence services had focused their attention on American tank armor, guns, and mechanical reliability, while completely missing the communication revolution that had transformed American armored tactics. This intelligence failure meant that German forces would enter combat against opponents whose true capabilities remained invisible until the moment those capabilities were demonstrated with devastating effect. The stage was set for a form of warfare that German doctrine had never anticipated. American Sherman tanks would prove that technological inferiority in armor and guns could be overcome through communications superiority that transformed the entire battlefield into a unified weapon system. The Germans were about to learn that the tank they had dismissed as inferior was actually the most dangerous weapon they would face in Normandy. June 15, 1944, 14:23 hours, near Villers-Bocage, Normandy. The German 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion advanced through the Norman countryside with the confidence of predators entering their hunting ground. Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, Germany's leading tank ace with 138 confirmed kills, commanded his Tiger the Run from the lead position as his unit moved to intercept reported American armor advancing through the bocage. The massive 57-ton Tiger's 88mm gun could penetrate any American tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, while its 100mm frontal armor was virtually invulnerable to American 75mm return fire. 3 miles northeast of Wittmann's position, Staff Sergeant Mitchell's Sherman Fury 2 emerged from behind a hedgerow into a small clearing where Rodriguez had established clear radio contact with Allied aircraft circling overhead. Through his periscope, Mitchell observed the German advance. 5 Tiger tanks moving in classic formation with infantry support, exactly the kind of engagement that German doctrine had designed to favor German armor. Mitchell knew that direct engagement meant certain destruction for his Sherman, but he also knew that his tank carried capabilities that Wittmann couldn't imagine. Rodriguez adjusted his radio equipment and transmitted a coded message that would have sounded like routine tactical communication to any German radio operator monitoring American frequencies. The transmission included precise coordinates, target identification, and a request for immediate close air support that reached Allied aircraft within seconds. High above the Norman battlefield, P-47 Thunderbolts of the 365th Fighter Group received the call and began their deadly descent toward coordinates that Rodriguez had calculated with mathematical precision. Wittmann's Tiger continued its advance, unaware that death was approaching at 400 miles per hour from directly overhead. The German tank commander had positioned his forces according to standard doctrine that assumed engagement ranges, ammunition types, and terrain considerations drawn from 3 years of successful armored warfare. The possibility that American ground forces could coordinate immediate airstrikes against his position had never entered German tactical calculations or training scenarios. The first P-47 Thunderbolt arrived over the target area exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds after Rodriguez's radio call. Pilot Captain Robert Johnson rolled his aircraft into a steep dive, his 8 50-caliber machine guns and 2,500 pounds of high-explosive rockets aimed at the German armor that Rodriguez had marked with smoke grenades. From 15,000 feet, Johnson could see the German Tigers clearly silhouetted against the green Norman fields, completely exposed and unaware of the attack developing above them. Wittmann heard the aircraft engines only seconds before the first rockets struck the ground around his Tiger with explosive force that exceeded anything he had experienced in armored combat. The P-47's 8 machine guns strafed the German position with streams of 50-caliber bullets that ricocheted off armor while forcing infantry to seek cover. Johnson's rocket attack bracketed the German formation, creating explosions that disabled tracks, damaged optics, and wounded crew members through concussion effects that penetrated even heavy armor. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. German tank crews that had approached the engagement with complete confidence in their technological superiority suddenly found themselves under attack from directions they couldn't counter and by weapons they couldn't engage. Wittmann's radio crackled with confused reports from his unit commanders describing aircraft attacks that seemed to appear from nowhere, coordinated with ground forces in ways that German doctrine had never anticipated. Rodriguez called in corrections to the airstrike, adjusting impact points with precision that amazed even experienced forward air controllers. His radio training had prepared him to function as both tank crew member and air support coordinator, enabling him to direct multiple aircraft against specific targets while maintaining tank operations. The Sherman's radio equipment provided communication capabilities that transformed Mitchell's tank from a vulnerable ground unit into a command platform that could orchestrate devastating combined arms attacks. The second wave of P-47s arrived before Wittmann's unit could recover from the initial attack. Captain James Bradley led 3 Thunderbolts in coordinated rocket attacks that struck German positions with surgical accuracy, guided by Rodriguez's radio corrections and Mitchell's target identification. The American aircraft delivered their ordnance with precision that reflected months of training in air-ground coordination, turning the Normandy battlefield into a killing ground where German armor had no effective response. Wittmann ordered his surviving Tigers to withdraw, but Rodriguez had anticipated the German movement and called for interdiction strikes against likely retreat routes. American P-51 Mustangs arrived to strafe the German withdrawal, their machine guns and small bombs creating continuous pressure that prevented organized movement. The German formation that had advanced with confidence was now scattered and demoralized, unable to concentrate firepower or coordinate defensive measures. The engagement lasted 17 minutes from first contact to German withdrawal, but the tactical lesson was permanent and devastating. American tank units that appeared vulnerable when considered individually had demonstrated the ability to coordinate airstrikes that could neutralize German armor advantages within minutes of contact. The Sherman that German crews had dismissed as inferior had proven capable of summoning firepower that exceeded anything available to German ground forces. Mitchell watched through his periscope as the German Tigers disappeared into the bocage, leaving behind damaged vehicles and the unmistakable evidence that German armored doctrine had been fundamentally challenged. His Sherman had not fired a single round from its 75mm gun, yet his unit had achieved tactical victory against opponents whose individual capabilities far exceeded anything American armor could match in direct engagement. The radio equipment that had made this victory possible remained invisible to German observation and understanding. Rodriguez's advanced communication gear looked identical to standard tank radios from external observation, while the coordination procedures that had summoned devastating air support appeared to be routine tank communication to anyone monitoring American frequencies. The true extent of American capabilities remained hidden even after their demonstration. German intelligence services would struggle for months to understand how American tank units had achieved such effective coordination with aircraft, never suspecting that individual Sherman tanks carried communication equipment that could function as forward air control platforms. The technological advantage remained invisible, protected by operational security that kept the most important aspects of American capabilities completely hidden from enemy analysis. The engagement at Villers-Bocage became a template for American combined arms operations throughout the Normandy campaign, demonstrating that technological inferiority in individual platforms could be overcome through communication superiority that transformed entire battlefields into unified weapon systems. The Sherman tank had proven itself to be far more dangerous than German commanders had ever imagined, not because of its armor or guns, but because of its ability to bring the sky itself into the ground battle. Within hours of the Villers-Bocage engagement, reports of American air-ground coordination capabilities began circulating through German command channels with a mixture of disbelief and growing alarm. Wittmann's after-action report described American tank units that could coordinate immediate airstrikes with precision that exceeded anything German forces had previously encountered. German commanders initially dismissed these reports as combat exaggeration, unable to believe that American ground forces possess such sophisticated coordination capabilities. The psychological impact on German tank crews was immediate and profound. Panzer commanders who had approached Norman engagements with confidence based on armor and firepower superiority suddenly found themselves questioning fundamental assumptions about battlefield dynamics. German crews began reporting increased stress during operations, with particular anxiety about aircraft attacks that seemed to appear with supernatural timing and accuracy whenever American tank units were encountered. American Sherman crews experienced a complete transformation in confidence and tactical thinking as word of successful air-ground coordination spread through Allied units. Tank commanders who had dreaded encounters with German armor suddenly felt empowered by communication capabilities that enabled them to call upon the entire Allied Air Force for support. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, commanding Sherman Iron Horse, wrote to his family, "We're not fighting alone anymore. Every time we see German armor, we know the sky is watching and ready to help." German tactical doctrine underwent emergency revision as command authorities struggled to develop countermeasures against American air-ground coordination that they didn't fully understand. New operational orders emphasized dispersed formations, reduced radio communications, and increased attention to aircraft detection. But these measures were developed without accurate knowledge of American coordination procedures or communication capabilities. The medical impact on German forces became apparent as field hospitals reported increased numbers of casualties from air attacks that demonstrated unusual precision and timing. German medical officers documented blast injuries, concussion effects, and psychological trauma that indicated airstrikes of unprecedented accuracy and coordination. The pattern suggested systematic changes in Allied tactical capabilities that German intelligence struggled to analyze. American air crews began receiving target coordinates and strike requests with frequency and precision that amazed experienced combat pilots. Captain Johnson reported, "The ground units are calling us in like we're artillery batteries. They give us exact coordinates, timing, and target identification that makes our job easier and deadlier than anything we've done before. It's like fighting with a completely integrated team instead of separate services." German radio intercept services detected increased American communication traffic, but failed to identify the air-ground coordination procedures that were transforming battlefield dynamics. German signals intelligence focused on decrypting message content rather than analyzing communication patterns, missing the systematic integration that enabled American combined arms operations. The strategic implications became apparent as German armored effectiveness declined dramatically across the Normandy front. Panzer units that had consistently achieved favorable exchange ratios against Allied armor suddenly found themselves suffering disproportionate losses from air attacks that seemed to target German formations with impossible accuracy. German commanders attributed these losses to increased Allied air activity rather than improved coordination procedures. American combined arms doctrine evolved rapidly as successful air-ground coordination techniques were standardized and distributed throughout Allied armored units. Training programs incorporated lessons learned from Normandy engagements, while communication equipment was modified to improve coordination capabilities. The success of Sherman-directed airstrikes became a model for combined arms operations that would influence military doctrine for decades. German intelligence services launched investigations into reported American air-ground coordination capabilities, but their analysis was hampered by fundamental misunderstanding of American communication technology and tactical procedures. German investigators focused on equipment modifications and personnel training, while missing the systematic integration that enabled American tank units to function as air support coordination platforms. The industrial implications became apparent as American radio manufacturers ramped up production of advanced communication equipment for tank units worldwide. The success of air-ground coordination in Normandy created demand for communication gear that could support similar operations in the Pacific Theater, Italy, and anticipated European campaigns. American industrial capacity enabled rapid deployment of communication advantages that other armies couldn't match. Allied morale improvements were documented across multiple units, as successful air-ground coordination demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated operations. Infantry units reported increased confidence when operating with tank support that could summon immediate air assistance, while artillery observers found their roles expanded to include coordination with both ground and air assets. The psychological advantage was enormous. Allied forces felt supported by capabilities that seemed to anticipate and counter every German tactical move. German attempts to develop countermeasures against American air-ground coordination proved futile, because German command never accurately identified the specific procedures and equipment that enabled American capabilities. Without understanding how American tank units coordinated with aircraft, German defensive measures addressed symptoms rather than causes, providing little protection against attacks they couldn't predict or prevent. The statistical transformation was undeniable. German armor losses increased by 340% in areas where American tank-directed airstrikes were employed, while American tank losses decreased by 60% when air support coordination was available. These numbers reflected fundamental changes in combat dynamics that German doctrine couldn't address without accurate understanding of American capabilities. The cultural impact within American armored forces was profound and lasting. Tank crews that had accepted their vulnerability to German armor suddenly felt empowered by communication capabilities that transformed their tactical situation. The psychological transformation was complete. American tank units had evolved from reluctant participants in armored warfare to confident coordinators of combined arms operations that could overwhelm any German formation. The success of Sherman tank air-ground coordination in Normandy triggered a revolution in military communication technology that established principles governing combined arms operations for the remainder of the 20th century. American radio manufacturers developed standardized communication equipment that enabled any tank unit to function as an air support coordination platform, while training programs created specialized personnel capable of managing multiple communication networks simultaneously during combat operations. American military doctrine underwent fundamental revision as the effectiveness of tank-directed airstrikes demonstrated capabilities that exceeded traditional combined arms theory. The integration of ground and air forces through advanced communication technology created force multiplication effects that enabled smaller American units to defeat larger German formations through coordination rather than direct firepower. This doctrinal evolution influenced American military thinking throughout subsequent conflicts and established templates for modern battlefield management. The technological advantages demonstrated through Sherman radio coordination revealed American industrial capabilities that German intelligence had consistently underestimated. American factories were simultaneously producing thousands of advanced radio systems, training millions of personnel in complex communication procedures, and developing coordination techniques that integrated multiple combat arms with unprecedented efficiency. The scale of this technological integration exceeded anything available to German forces. German attempts to counter American air-ground coordination capabilities proved futile because German industry lacked the manufacturing capacity to produce comparable communication equipment on the scale required for widespread deployment. While American tank units routinely carried advanced radio gear that enabled air support coordination, German panzer crews relied on standard military radios that provided only basic tactical communication capabilities. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual engagements to fundamental questions about the nature of modern warfare and technological advantages. American success in integrating ground and air forces through communication technology demonstrated that superior coordination could overcome numerical and technological disadvantages in individual weapons platforms. This lesson influenced military planning throughout the Cold War and established American doctrinal emphasis on technological integration. American communication security procedures protected the most important aspects of air-ground coordination capabilities from German intelligence analysis. While German services could observe the results of American combined arms operations, they never gained accurate understanding of the communication procedures, equipment specifications, or training methods that enabled American tank units to coordinate airstrikes with such devastating effectiveness. The economic analysis of American communication technology development revealed industrial advantages that enabled mass production of advanced equipment at costs that made widespread deployment economically feasible. American radio manufacturers applied automotive production techniques to military communication equipment, reducing unit costs while improving reliability and performance. This industrial approach enabled American forces to deploy communication advantages that German forces couldn't afford to match. International implications became apparent as Allied forces worldwide began receiving American communication equipment and training in air-ground coordination procedures. British, Canadian, and Free French units gained access to American communication technology, spreading American tactical advantages throughout Allied operations and establishing American leadership in military communication technology that would persist for decades. Post-war analysis revealed that American air-ground coordination capabilities had achieved tactical advantages that exceeded German comprehension during active combat operations. German commanders never understood how American tank units could consistently coordinate airstrikes with precision that seemed almost supernatural. This intelligence failure prevented German forces from developing effective countermeasures and contributed to systematic German tactical failures throughout the Normandy campaign. The research and development infrastructure created to support tank communication technology established capabilities that would dominate American military communication development throughout the Cold War and beyond. The expertise, manufacturing facilities, and training programs developed for Sherman radio coordination became the foundation for advanced military communication systems that maintained American technological superiority in subsequent conflicts. The lessons learned from tank-directed airstrikes influenced American military doctrine regarding technological integration, force multiplication, and combined arms operations. American commanders recognized that superior communication capabilities could enable smaller forces to defeat larger opponents through coordination advantages that transcended individual weapons performance. This understanding became fundamental to American military planning and established principles that continue to guide military technology development. The transformation of the Sherman tank from a dismissed Ronson lighter into the trigger for devastating airstrikes represented more than tactical innovation. It demonstrated the power of American technological integration to redefine the fundamental nature of modern warfare. German panzer crews, who had approached Normandy with confidence in their armor and firepower superiority, discovered that individual weapons advantages meant nothing against enemies who could coordinate the entire sky as a single weapon system. The irony was historically profound and strategically decisive. German commanders had dismissed the Sherman as technologically inferior, while completely missing the communication revolution that had transformed American armored doctrine. The tank that German crews mocked for its thin armor and weak gun had become the most dangerous weapon on the battlefield, not because of what it carried, but because of what it could summon from above. The human dimension of this transformation revealed the power of coordination to multiply individual capabilities beyond recognition. American tank crews, who had feared encounters with German armor, suddenly felt empowered by communication links that connected them to thousands of aircraft ready to respond within minutes. The psychological advantage was immense. American forces were fighting with capabilities that seemed to anticipate and counter every German tactical move. The strategic implications extended far beyond Normandy to fundamental questions about technological development and military innovation. American success with tank-directed airstrikes proved that superior integration could overcome individual platform deficiencies, establishing principles that would guide military technology development for generations. The lesson was clear. Future warfare would be won not by individual weapons, but by systems that could coordinate multiple capabilities with precision and speed. The ultimate testament to American success lay in German confusion about the nature of their own defeat. Post-war interrogations revealed that German commanders never understood how American forces had achieved such devastating coordination between ground and air assets. They attributed their losses to superior numbers, better equipment, and tactical luck, rather than the fundamental technological revolution that had transformed American military capabilities. The Sherman wasn't just a tank, it was the trigger that brought the sky down. Stories like this reveal how American innovation could transform apparent weaknesses into overwhelming strengths, proving that technological integration and superior coordination could overcome any tactical disadvantage. In the next episode, we'll explore another hidden American advantage that caught enemy forces completely unprepared. Would you have feared more the tank in front of you or the sky above you? Subscribe now to uncover the hidden weapons of World War II.